the first video on this channel, I showed off the GPD Win 2, an extremely compact handheld that runs Windows 10 and could play older AAA titles on the go. It gave the Switch a run for its money and had a library that I vastly preferred over what Nintendo offered. So, as you can imagine, I got a ton of use out of this thing, playing for hours at a time in some of my favorite Steam games. But the pocketable form factor of this PC ultimately came at a cost. Compared to full-fledged gaming desktops and laptops, the Win 2 could only run a limited amount of titles at decent frame rates, and as my Steam library grew, I needed something that could handle all my games. This void has officially been filled by the GPD Win 3, which packs serious punch compared to its predecessor. The Win 3 I have here has an Intel Core i7-1165G7, 16GB of RAM, 1TB of storage, and Intel's Iris Xe graphics. I got my unit on eBay, but if you get it on Amazon, you will get an 1195 G7 processor, and you will have the option of either a 1TB or 2TB model. My unit also has Windows 11, but you will get Windows 10 from Amazon. In terms of ports, you get a 3.5mm headphone jack, a microSD card slot, a full-size USB port, and a Thunderbolt 4 USB-C port, which is used for charging and for hooking up a separate Win 3 dock to increase your port selection. You can also hook up an eGPU through this port for significantly better performance if you have one laying around. With these specs, the device goes for about $1,300 for the 1TB model and $1,530 for the 2TB model, which is really steep. But you can find one on eBay for significantly cheaper even when bundled in with an official dock and grip. The Win 3 is about the size of a Switch Lite, but the former is pretty heavy and is abnormally thick in comparison, much like your mother. Both devices also have a 5.5-inch 720p display, which is rather nice for a handheld this small. The analog sticks are on the top of the device with the face buttons and D-pad positioned below them. Everything feels very nice and responsive here. You have your shoulder buttons on the back as usual, but the L2 and R2 triggers are now analog, which is a nice touch. And you also have these remappable buttons, which can be controlled with GPD software. Another neat feature of this PC is a backlit capacitive touch keyboard found by sliding the display up. To a lot of you, this may be inferior to the keyboards on previous GPD devices, but it is surprisingly decent, in my opinion at least. Something else that I wanted to see was whether or not I could pocket my Win 3. You may recall that one of my favorite features of the Win 2 was its very pocketable form factor. Unfortunately for the Win 3, however, it does not sport the clamshell design of GPD's previous mini PCs, meaning the analog sticks will now poke out if you try to put it in your pocket. For those of you with smaller pockets, this thing won't fit in your pockets. However, if you happen to have larger and more capable pockets, the Win 3 will fit. Expect it to be heavy and to have the analog sticks poking out though. If you are unsure if you will be able to pocket this bad boy and you happen to have a Switch Lite and a phone with a case, you can stack the two devices like so and stick that combination in your pockets. If that can fit, so can the Win 3. Moving on to build quality, the Win 3 is encased in a plastic housing without any aluminum accents. This may be a letdown to a few of you out there, but only a very minor one at that. You can also get vinyl skins for the device from SoapyGuard if you don't like the texture of the Win 3's plastic. I've put a link to SoapyGuard in the video description. The ergonomics of the Win 3 are decent, but nothing to write home about. The buttons and analog sticks feel very nice and clicky, but the device is relatively heavy. Again, similar to your mother. It should still be manageable to hold, though. This bottom area of the Win 3 digs into my hands, which is definitely noteworthy, but it is also easily remedied by buying and using a Win 3 grip case. There should be links for this, a carrying case, and more in the description below. And now, at long last, we're going to test out some Steam games on this PC. I've set the TDP of this device to 15 watts, which should give you a minimum of 2 hours of battery life out of this thing, and allow you to reach over 6 hours of battery life in lower demand titles like Brawlhalla and BTD 6. I did this via the BIOS of my device. I will upload a separate video walking you through that in the near future. First, let's try some 2016 Doom. I have the game set to the low preset with a 90% resolution scale and no anti-aliasing. For the most part, we are getting 60 FPS, but we do see some dips that go down to about 50 FPS, but it's nothing that'll make this unplayable. Judging by the performance, you could tweak the settings to get a more stable FPS or higher fidelity graphics, and you would still be going strong. Also, the smaller display masks lower resolutions very nicely. So yeah, it plays Doom. Next, I wanted to try out Doom's more demanding cousin, Doom Eternal, to really tax the system. At the lowest possible settings and a 50% resolution scale, we cap out at 60 FPS and do see some sizable dips in performance, but nothing game-breaking. Once again, the small display really makes it hard to notice the low graphics and resolution settings, so this is a nice experience. As a matter of fact, I'd rather have this than the switchboard. Nice. And finally, I wanted to throw a fighting game into the mix. So here we have Injustice 2 at all low settings at 720p full screen. We're almost locked at 60 FPS, barely ever dropping frames, and the low preset for Injustice 2 still looks absolutely gorgeous. If you wanted to, you could probably raise some settings and still get good performance on this lower DDP. So, no complaints here.
Atrocitus wins.
One last thing I wanted to cover here was the cooling system in this thing. One major problem in the Win 2 was its less than ideal temps, which could cause overheating and thermal throttling in some cases. However, it appears GPD really stepped up their game here and the device manages to stay cool in my testing. Again, I used the BIOS of the Win 3 to keep the fan noise down a little, so make sure to watch my upcoming video on that. Overall, the Win 3 has a cooling system that makes the Win 2 look pathetic. Nice work, GPD. So, in conclusion, the GPD Win 3 is a very compact mini-PC that can play tons of demanding titles on the go, much like the Win 2 did before it. There is still one more thing to address though. Is the Win 3 able to keep up with competitors like the Aya Neo lineup and the Steam Deck? Well, it depends. While the Aya Neo and Steam Deck may have better drivers thanks to their use of AMD hardware rather than Intel's components, the Win 3 has one thing against the rest of the pack: form factor. Both the Neo and the Steam Deck are significantly larger than a Nintendo Switch, but the Win 3 is closer in size to a Switch Lite, meaning that some of you may be able to pocket this thing. So, if you don't want or need a handheld this small, you may want to look into alternatives. But if you want a mini PC with similar performance in a much smaller package, look no further than the GPD Win 3. But that about wraps this video up. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and let me know in the comments how I did. Also, I want to thank you all for getting me to 100 subs. Thank you. That means a lot to me. Well, that's it for now. See ya.